Hi, this is Kevin with Tri-State Ministries. I want to tell another story. Um, in one of the first short stories that I did, I had spoke about some Jehovah Witnesses that had come by the house a few times, and basically it was a short version of everything that I talked to them about. And then toward the end, I talked about that the way our God, our consciousness, and our reality is set up that we can let our past define who we are. And I want to talk about that a little bit because that's a big deal in a lot of people's lives. Um, the test, the turmoil, the things that we go through, money, bills, materialistic things that detach us from where we need to be is a lot of people's lives. And that's all they know. And that's a majority they know. And they try to get away from the stress and turmoil of life by doing drugs or drinking or whatever. And it's an epidemic on the epidemic proportions, I think, and definitely in this country and all over the world, really. So what do? I'm no better than anyone else, and I fall from that all the time, and I do those things sometimes, and not all of them, but I do drink sometimes, and I know I shouldn't, and I feel guilty when I do that the next day. So that's how I know sooner or later I'm going to quit forever and ever, because um, it hurts, and it hurts, and it never gets better, and it doesn't make anything better. I'm all about having a good time and laughing and joking and acting stupid for sure. Um, and and I'm not saying that when you do those things for the sake of having fun, that's one thing. When you do that to try to escape, that's another. And that's what I'm talking about, is when people are hurting and they turn to those things out of pain and suffering instead of turning to the Lord or consciousness. Um, they live in the past, and it could be something that happened 20, 30 years, depending on the age of the person. Um, and they can't escape it in their own mind. And it's not that other people judge them by their actions anymore or even remember, but how we're wired, some of us or some people, they can't let that go, and it's hard, and they live in the past. How do you do it then? Well, I'll tell you some more stories. At one given time in my life, a few years ago, and it is while I was searching and for love and the light, and in the middle of it, let's see where to start. My dad was dying of emphysema, and he was wasting away, and he wasn't going to go easy, and it was very hard on my entire family and kids, and he would, as he was dying, he wouldn't die without saying goodbye, and he wanted to talk to me, and I was selfish because I had talked to him before that, and I didn't not want to see him die or even be around there, and I had told him that, and he told me that he understood, that he didn't agree with it, but he understood. So that was my intention, that I wasn't going to be right there with him. He would not die. He was hanging on. It was way past his time, but he would not go. And my wife more or less said, and I love her very much, and she says, you got to go. You got to tell him goodbye. You got to do it, because he's going to hold on, and you has to do it, and you have to do it. So I baked him a birthday cake. He loved chocolate cake and peaches, but I didn't have any peaches, so I took it over to him. And I love my family, but they're all around him in the room that he was in, and he was definitely not good shape. But the relationship I had with my dad, I was not going to pull punches and not going to be me, because I just didn't want to do that, because it didn't seem real to me, to be fake and to be baby him or worry. No, that's my father, and I'm his son, and that's the way I'm going to be, and that's the way I had it in my mind. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. That's just the way I am. And so I immediately said, hey, walked in the room, hey, Dad, how you doing? And my brother and sister were looking at me like, oh, you need to be quiet. And I'm like, no. And I shook it off, and I'm not going to. And I said, hey, Dad, I said, I bet you this birthday cake, you want to smell it? And I put it underneath him, and he smelled it. He shook his head a little bit. And yeah, I don't think he wanted that in his face at all either. But I knew I had his attention. And I said, hey, Dad, I'm going to be leaving here in 20 minutes or so. And if you want to go with me, I'll open up all the doors and windows and all that. So you about ready? And he shook his head, yes. While we were there, that was, and then my sister-in-law had made supper for all my family, and this was the first time we'd all been in the same house together to eat. Maybe 20 years, I'm not for sure. But it was nice. And after we got done eating, my brother asked my father if he wanted to listen to his music that he picked out for his funeral, and my dad shook his head yes. So I sat beside him in a chair. My mom was right next to me in another chair, and I rubbed my father's arm, and I rubbed his forehead, and I was like face to face with him, and I said that I loved him with all my heart, and that I was proud to be his son, and that I would make sure that his grandkids never forgot him, and that I was proud to be his son, and that he was a good father, and he could always live through me. That he could, whenever he needed to, he could look through my eyes if he needed to, and he could always be right here with us, and that I loved him. And as I rubbed his head and I rubbed his arm, and I spoke those words to him and said, it's all right, Dad, I love you. Everything's good. He had stopped breathing. And I told my mother, I said, go get Keith and Tammy and get them in here. So they came in and said their goodbyes to Dad. And that was hard. It was hard. It was harder, I think, on my brother and sister. And wasn't that I don't love him, wasn't that I just look at death and those things a little bit different. I think in the United States and our cultures, we are bred to be sad and miserable when it comes to funerals. And I'm not saying that you can't be sad. I'm saying it's another plane of existence that they're getting to go to, and it doesn't have to be sorrow. We can miss them, we can mourn them, but as far as the beat you up daily forever and ever, that wasn't the person's intent of their life with you, and that's not God's intentions of putting people together, is that misery that some people do feel. And that's hard to take. At that same time that my father was dying, my business had went to crap completely, from losing a zero every month, which is a big deal, but it was a hard time. As my dad was dying the last week, a friend of mine, also at the exact same time, his daughter was killed in a hit and run accident. And my dad was friends with him too. He came to see my father a few days before he died. My father did know that his daughter had been killed, and it was hard. And this was about 5 days before Dad died. I hadn't seen this person for a few years. We had a falling out, but it wasn't, and I still don't hate him at all. I have a lot of love and respect for him. We have a lot of things in common. And at that time, me and him hadn't spoke for a year or so. But as soon as I had found out, I reached out to a friend of ours and said, hey, if he needs to talk, I'll be there. And he got a hold of me and said he wants you to be at the courthouse because they got the guy that had killed his daughter in a hit and run. So I was like, sure, no problem. I'll go there. I'll be there. So I went to the courthouse, and I went right up to him in the court before the court. He was in the front row, I believe, and I leaned down and gave him a hug. Him and his wife said I loved him, and if they need anything, I'd be there for him. And he had left a seat open for me, which the courtroom was packed. And I'm like, no, just let your family sit there. It's all right. I'll be outside. So I went outside, and I was outside the courtroom. And inside this courtroom in Hancock County, there's a big circle, goes all the way from the top all the way to the bottom. And we were on the second floor or whatever. And I was on the opposite side of the courtroom of this big circled area. So they bring the guy in handcuffed and shackled, and they go into the courtroom, and it's very, very quick. And I was amazed at how fast it was over. And They came walking out, two guards or sheriff's department, had the prisoner arm in arm, still in shackles and handcuffs, and they walked him around the opposite side of the circle I was on, and they were getting ready to take him, I believe, out the doors and then to the jailhouse. Well, as they're making their way around, my friend comes out and he's elbowing and he's coming around and he starts going in the opposite circle of where these guys were, because there was no people on this side, the side I was on, except me. And as he's going, it literally is in slow motion. And I'm seeing him running around the circle. I'm seeing the cops walk the person out of walking the prisoner out. And they are about on the verge of the steps, but my friend is moving quickly. And I'm thinking the entire time, oh my God, he's going to get that guy. He's going to get on him. He's going to kill him. God only knows what he's going to do, because this man killed his daughter. And as he's running, I'm thinking, I have a daughter. I mean, it's like slow-mo. It was weird. It was just like, oh my God, this is going to happen. And I'm like, I've got to stop him. I've got to stop him. I knew I was going to have to hit him hard to stop him, because he was going after the person that killed his daughter. So I waited, because I didn't want to tackle him straight over the balcony and fall to the second story. I had to wait till he got right past me, but he was on the verge of jumping on this person's back. He was within, like, ready to jump. And I tackled him hard, and I hit him as hard as I could on the side. And I tackled him, and he drugged me. And he was crying and screaming. I remember the words. They're burned in my brain, and I'm care not to repeat them, but... and he didn't cuss. I mean, it was just, it was some of the most powerful things I've ever been part of. It was so heart-wrenching at that moment, And I'm crying because he's crying and screaming and trying to get to this guy, and I'm crying because I don't know if I did the right thing. And after that, he didn't speak to me for about 3 or 4 days. And my father was still alive at that time, and he came over, or he texted me or called me and said he wanted to see my dad. So I said, okay. I said, yeah. So he came and spoke to my father, and I kind of left the table, while they were speaking to each other. And my dad said that he was very sorry to hear about his daughter, and, it was terrible. And my friend said to him, he was really upset with me because of what I'd done. And it took him 3 days to realize that I had helped him, because they hadn't had a funeral and he had other children, and which made me feel better at that time, And then after that, he wanted to see the vehicle that his daughter was in, and he didn't want to do, and I didn't want him to go there, and I didn't want him to be alone for sure either. But I went with him, and you can imagine how that was. And then a few days later, my father had passed away, died. And then a week later, my first cousin died of a heart attack. At the same time, family, friends that we grew up with, they found him in the woods. A tree had hit him. And I pray to God that he didn't suffer. He's one of the best persons on the planet. All his kids are, his sons, they're all the top people that I've ever known as far as character and overall person. They're great people. And then about a month or so after that, my mother-in-law had got into needing heart surgery, and they couldn't pull the trach out of her throat without it closing up, and it was killing her. And that was a big deal in the family, and she was more or less open for a month. And then around the same time, then one of my friends that I grew up with, and he was also worked for me, and he was helping put on a deck at my house. When he had left my house, he had blowed through a stop sign and got T-boned. Or another friend of mine, my wife, she was coming up the driveway, and she screamed before the impact actually hit, and I came running around the corner, and then that's when we could hear the impact. And a few of us was the first on the scenes, and a gentleman and we were the first guys there, and we did CPR on my friend, and he wasn't breathing. And then on the third breath, he started guppy breathing, but it was pretty clear that he wasn't going to make it. And it was pretty tough. I mean, that was pretty emotional, all these things. During this, 6-7 month period when all this went on, it was hard. I mean, and then on top, as far as financially, we went from a lot of money to absolutely none almost within, right at the same time. And it was all happening at the same time. And it was pretty tough. And at that time, on different little jobs that we were doing, I would be down at the pump. Like we do a lot of painting. We were painting a roof, and as a guy would come by, a total stranger come by one day, and he wanted a light for a cigarette, and I didn't smoke, so the other guy that was up on the roof gave him a light, and he's upset. He's crying and he starts talking to me, and he tells me that his wife had left him and he was ready to commit suicide. And this was a total stranger, which I thought was very odd. So I told him pretty much everything that had happened with me, and I said, hey, life's what you make it. If you want this to tear you up and to eat you up and call it quits, even though you have kids and other family, it can define you. God will let that happen, or you can go past it. You can make it through. Stay positive, You don't have to be dictated by your past. These are things that are trying to get you away from being part of the consciousness, the love of God. And he cried and said, oh my God, I feel so terrible with all the things you went through. And I said, don't feel bad for me. I'm all right. I got it, And he kept on walking. And then it happened 2 more times within a week and a half time of 2 other individuals, same scenario. His one's wife died and the other wife had left him too. And they said that they were going to kill themselves. And then I was just blown away that this had happened. You know what I mean? That it had happened. Do I believe that it was God's will or consciousness or the plan of whatever? Yeah, I believe that. I really do. The things for me, I had learned prior to all these things that have happened. Believe me, it took a toll, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm smiling every day. But every day you have to take it, I had realized a few years before that when a friend of mine had died. It was a lot of years before that, really. But for me to get over it, I realized when I say the gift of the consciousness of just us being able to feel is the gift and what it's all about, I understood and I realized to get over something totally that hurts you, and I'm talking everyone has their own crosses to bear, so to say, but to get past those, for me, I found out that you literally have to thank God for all of it, for all the good, all the bad, sad, glad, indifferent, every bit of emotion. And what I mean by that is you have to say thank you. If it's for taking someone, for anything bad in your life, you have to literally thank God for that experience and mean it. And that's hard to do. It's very hard to do, but you can do it. Anyone can do it. But that's how you get over something. How do you let it not define you? You literally go to that place in your mind, pray, and mean it, and you tell God that you're thankful for that good, bad, sad, and indifferent, everything, the things that have happened to you that destroyed you, you think that you can't hardly even talk about, you thank God for that experience. When you can do that, that's when you get over it. And that's when you can see past it all and understand, I've got this. I can do it. I can go through anything. And it really does help. I don't know if this makes sense to anyone because I don't try to write nothing down. I just talk. And I don't know if it makes any sense or not, but if you're ever in a spot and you can't get over it, or if you've always lived in the past and you don't know how to get rid of it, ask God to get rid of it and thank Him for the experience. thank him for the chance to move forward and mean it, and you can do it. And then you can be better for everyone and yourself. Peace and love. See ya.